held for a second as they're like trying to make the decision, or she's trying to make the decision, but then it comes back in as they're like, hey, I'm on the path to being a mentor for my little sister.
Okay. I can do that. Thank you.
Or whatever else feels right. I mean,
I think so. I should appreciate that.
What's next?
I'm gonna have to start going by ranking. If nobody else wants to see that.
Start at the top.
I'll always start at the top.
Start. I am a bully.
I am a bully.
I am a bully.
I called her stupid. I called him weak.
I called them fake.
I called her annoying.
But I can change.
But I can change.
I called her nice. I called him strong.
I called her clever. I called him strong.
Now I call them my friends.
cool. I like the changing color, like that you're doing something visually that supports the transition.
Should I change the color like the green and the gray for when I say that I can change? Because it doesn't look exciting, like that one.
This?
Yeah.
So,
What did you shoot them in front of?
A
Green
green
screen.
I think you, in something like this, you want to be very like conscious about your color palette. So, like right now you have like, he's on one background, that guy's on the next, on the same background, then they're all on the same background, but it's a different background. So like, I would either change the background like every shot,
Okay.
or I would stay consistent,
Okay.
like that, like kind of like on white look of someone on a white background is very like clean, and you can pull that off with like very minimal production value and still look, you know, fairly polished. Once you start getting into like a 4-color gradient, then there's a lot more chance to kind of feel less polished, I guess. Like that color doesn't really tie into anything else in it. So you might think about keeping it more subtle, like, you know, maybe it's more of just like a warm color background or a cool color background or something like that. And I think wherever possible, like if you're compositing something behind someone, like you probably want it to feel, it doesn't have to be like super real, but you want it to feel like it could have been shot that way. So, you know, like I would try to make something that looks like,
I called
you
her
know, it was all shot on like against a wall or a paper color background or something, and has maybe a little bit of like shape to it, like a little bit of vignetting, but
Okay.
you know, feels real.
Yeah, and if you could just do like a warm off-white kind of thing.
Okay.
And then basically export your whole timeline, and then instead of just going from gray to color, just slowly bring up the saturation.
Okay.
So that what I can change, he starts to get a little bit of color.
Okay.
And then by the end, it's full color on a nice warm background.
Okay.
And I would give you the same note that I've mentioned before, like the more, you want your type to be like pretty clean, otherwise people won't be able to read it quickly, and when things get horizontally compressed, they get harder to read. So just think simple. And I would also say in general for these, like, I know you're doing these as a class project, so you might not necessarily have a like specific thing you want people to do as a result of watching them, but like telling me to stay positive, like that's good, but how? Like what should I actually be doing? And that's something you'll see as you're like interfacing with clients, is like you want to be working toward like a specific call to action of like stay positive. Not necessarily like visit staypositive.com, but like, you know, brush your teeth 3 times a day or whatever the thing is that helps people to stay positive.
Okay.
And trying to avoid serif fonts.
Tell us
Yeah.
little details on all the letters.
Yeah, although like it can also be like a serif font can be okay. Like it can add to an aesthetic. Like in the I'm sorry, I'm horrible with names, but in yours,
yeah.
the serif font over the like relatively clean background, when it's just a couple words and it's not horizontally compressed, I think is okay. So just getting a fresh perspective on it. Like ask someone, you know, you've stared at the thing as you've been working on it for, you know, weeks or months or whatever. Get a fresh perspective on someone who hasn't seen it before. Ask them like, you know, what did you think? Like, did you understand what I was trying to say? Could you read everything? Was it too fast? Was it too slow? That's always useful. Do we review Tyler's
Nope, not one minute.
Not completed. Like there's scenes in the middle that are just black.
Alright, do you wanna watch it and talk about it?
Yeah,
And it's 36.
Alright, so yours is animated. What made you want to do something animated as opposed to like everything else we've seen so far has been shot?
I wanted to have more control on how the characters look, but I've learned that that isn't so easy.
How did you do is it 3D or is that clay that's composited? Or? Okay, cool. Well, so I think like there's a lot of technically ambitious stuff in what you're doing that's really cool to see. You know, it obviously takes more work, but like trying to do something that looks different is something that will help you to stand out. So, you know, I was just thinking about like, so based on what you've learned, like, you know, one, how would you finish this up? And two, how would you come at it next time a little bit differently? Like, you know, if the Play-Doh people worked well, but the compositing is rough and you don't like the way they look in the environment, and I'm just making things up, you might like the way they look in the environment. But like,
something unique for the wrong kind of video.
well, but I mean, like, so the things that people stop and like watch as they're scrolling by on Facebook or whatever are the things that look unique. Like, if it looks like a bunch of talking heads, people aren't necessarily going to like spend the time to watch it. So if you have a unique visual concept, that's really powerful. But you have to be able to pull it off in some way. And I love drawing this thing, which is the curve of a project. So like at some point you start off. So at some point you start off with like a great idea, and then you start working on it. And you're like, oh, this is really hard. And then at some point you're like, I'm never gonna pull this off. Like, I'm not a good human being. And then things get a little bit better as like it starts to like come together and it starts to feel like a thing. And what you work toward might not be exactly what you thought it was gonna be at the start, but that's okay. Like, it's actually more unique and better for that. And you might never get up to that like initial high of like, this is gonna, you know, win an Academy Award for Best Student PSA, but like it's still, you know, better than you thought it was gonna be when you're in kind of the hard work of the middle of the project. And the more you do this, the more you'll kind of like recognize that pattern and know that like when you don't feel like something's coming together, you know, you're gonna get to something that's really cool and different because of it. So I think you made a cool choice to do something different than everyone else that I've seen so far.
Put it in the editor, I looked at it, and with the claymations and the childness that it felt, I switched over to the kindergarten through like 6th grade.
They have different categories. They do K6 or
Okay.
7-12.
Cool.
So I took out part of my video and trying to replace it.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, you know, you can also think about like, you know, is it interesting to your audience because it's different? Like, you know, we do very like polished things that are like fully digitally animated, but we wanted to do that holiday greeting thing as paper cutout stop motion because it would have rough edges, because it would look handmade and it would show that like, hey, there's people here who are working with you and we care about like being hands-on, and we don't necessarily look like every single polished thing you've seen from us over the years. Like this catches your attention because it's different. So that same kind of thing can be true, like, you know, for any like unique visual concept. So I would say too, like, don't give up necessarily on your audience. Like, adults like things that are playful too. So cool. Zachary.
The audio is awful.
Yeah, I mean, I think you like came up with a visual concept to represent, drug use and your amylase. So I like your lighting. Like, in general, this looks a little bit more dramatic than a lot of the stuff we've seen so far. It's a little bit less. I mean, that might be a couch, and you might just be out in the world somewhere, but like, it feels kind of like high contrast and lit. Even if that's just like the lights in your environment, like, that is a stronger shot for, I think, being on black as opposed to in front of whatever happened to be behind it, and it's backlit and dramatic and all that, and that also sets you up well for the text to kind of just sit across it. When you have statistics, and statistics are like a useful way of kind of establishing like, no, this is a really big deal, and I'm basing this on fact. I'm not just saying drugs are as deadly as a knife and then not backing it up. I think statistics can be really good at that. I would make sure your statistics are dramatic, like, that could be a dramatic statistic, but is there a way to really kind of make it pop? Like, can you show me, is there another number, like, instead of talking about a percentage, like, can we say that, this many more people died or what have you? And then, especially if this is actually going out into the world, you want to attribute it. Like, the cynics in your audience who you're maybe trying to persuade would say like, well, according to who? So to be able to attribute that, even if it's just like tiny text across the bottom of the screen, will increase your credibility too. I also like that your music is kind of like understated. Like,
It was lined up in the title side, so I just trying to look it up.
Sure. Cool. Yeah, but I like that it's kind of just like piano. A lot of production music can be overproduced and try to do too much. So I tend to like the stuff that's more stripped down.
Yeah, that actually reminded me of at least the subject matter reminded me of a few stories that I did over in